everyone. You are watching this video because you have received an email from me rewarding you with a free gift. And this video is your free gift. I want to thank you very, very much, all of you, for your wonderful support over the past few weeks. It's been amazing. I didn't actually expect this much of a great response. And I just felt I really had to say thank you. And so this is my thank you to you. I hope you enjoy the class. We're going to be working on a tree trunk today. This is a sketch that I did some time ago. Every one of you has a copy of that sketch, and you should have printed it out already, hopefully on some canvas paper, or regular paper is fine if you're using acrylic or watercolor. Um, some of the skills I'm teaching you, I'm doing everything in oil. That's what I use. However, some of the skills are transferable to other mediums such as oil and watercolor. So definitely you can follow along even if you're drawing as well. And I hope you really enjoy this. And thanks again. Welcome everyone. Today we're going to work on the tree trunk. As stated earlier, everyone should have this printed out on a paper of some kind. I'm using a canvas paper. They come in pads at most art stores. They're very inexpensive. You can just put this paper right into your printer and print the image that you received, and you should all have something like this. And it doesn't matter what size. This one is a 9 by 12. You can do an 8 by 10. You can do larger. You can do smaller. Whatever you would like to do. Again, I'm going to show you my palette. My palette is very messy. That's just, I don't mind working this way. For me, this is great because I've got all sorts of different colors already on the palette. So again, I'm using oil. I use walnut oil paint. It's my preference. And what I'm going to do first is decide, because I like to do these a little bit abstract, I'm going to decide what kind of colors I'm going to use today. And I think because it's a very gloomy day today, it's raining, I'm going to try to use something that's a little more colorful. So I'm going to go with my yellows and my reds, and I'm going to use some blue for my highlights, which if you are a painter sounds weird, but you'll know what I mean once we get started. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some of my red, and I'm going to grab some of my cad yellow, and I'm going to put that on my brush, and I'm going to start in an area. And what I'm doing today is pretty abstract, and I'm not going to give you a whole lot of instruction because I want you to really just kind of have fun with it and play around with the colors. These sketches I have actually in my sketchbook. I've got quite a few. I've been doing the tree trunks sketching since, really since high school, grade school even. I'm not sure where or how it came about. I've always had an affinity for trees, and it's just something that's always been easy for me to produce. And these sketches actually come out of my imagination. I spend a lot of time in the forest. Even as a kid I did. And so for me, it's fairly easy to come up with these ideas. So I've seen lots of different tree trunks, and I find the tree trunks especially fascinating. They're just one of those things that each one of them is unique, just like the tree itself. So I'm not going to really, as I said, give you a whole lot of instruction. You can kind of follow along what I'm doing. I'm just kind of alternating between my red and my yellow. I'm adding a little bit of white into areas that I want a little bit lighter. And I'm following along with some of the sketching, but not all of it. Some of it's going to get covered because there's pretty tiny lines. So it's really up to you how much of it you want to cover and how much of it you want to keep. In this particular one, I've already decided my sunshine is coming from the left. So as you can see, this side over here is going to be really quite bright because it's in the sunlight. I find it really different painting on this kind of material as well as compared to a traditional canvas. The paint feels a lot more dry. Could be the texture of the surface kind of grabs the paint a little differently than a traditional canvas. So it just kind of took me a little while to get used to. As I move over to the other side, I'm going to add, I've got burnt umber on my palette as well. You would have received a materials list prior to this little free class today, so you were able to get the colors. Now, as usual, I mean, just because I suggest colors, that doesn't mean you have to use those colors. Those are just suggested. You can certainly use whatever colors you would prefer yourself. And I think today I'm going to try and keep a lot of the sketch feel of the artwork rather than cover it up too much with the paint. And you'll understand what I mean as I go along. Just kind of keeping that sketchiness. So I find these days I'm working on a lot of different projects. I've got the video series I'm working on. I've got a collaboration in the works with a couple other artists. I'm working on putting some grants together, grant applications for some other projects that I have in the works. Lots of different things happening, and it's pretty neat to work on different things. It gives me a chance to work on things in advance and as I feel the need to work on things, because sometimes I feel like working on painting, other times I feel like working on videos, sometimes I'll do some sketches, other times I would just want to sit down and actually write, because I do write blogs as well. So having a variety of things I don't think is a bad thing. I know sometimes if you're an artist who is up and coming or is working towards doing that as your full-time job, sometimes you'll have people that say to you, oh, you should just focus on one thing and just put all your energy into that. And that's great advice. But don't forget to also put your creative energies into things that you really feel passionate about. So it's one thing to work on a project from start to finish, but it's another thing if you just kind of, you lose your passion for it partway through, then it's okay to put it aside. And don't beat yourself up or let anyone else beat yourself up over that. Because life, as we all know, especially these days, can throw you a lot of curveballs. And things change pretty fast. So don't be afraid to change your mind. So I'm just going to keep working here. We'll have some music going in the background as I work. And we'll interject a little bit here and there through the piece. This is more of a fun project. Again, this is for those of you who have signed up for classes in the last few weeks. This is my thank you to you. And I hope you really enjoy the process today. So as I make my way over to the far side, away from the sun, I'm slowly changing the colors to darker shades to show that these areas are more in the shadow and away from the sun. Now, if you recall, when you walk in the woods, you get little filters of light coming through from the treetops where the leaves will part and allow the sun to come straight through. And that gives you a little bit of a dappling in the forest floor. And so you'll get little areas of light bursting through here and there. And that's something that you can include in your art today when we're doing these paintings. It's a little dappling of the light going through. This area here is more in shadow because it's where the two roots meet in kind of a V area, and there's not a lot of light getting in there. I'm using the same brush. I haven't changed brushes yet through this entire process, just because I want to keep my palette the same. So I'm using the same colors, so I'm not changing up. As you can see, it's all sort of the same red and yellow and a little bit of the brown that I'm putting in here and there. And what that does is keep your composition quite simple and quite attractive, really. Color is great, but sometimes if you overuse it and put too many different things in a composition, it gets confusing. Of course, if that was your intent, then that's something you definitely want to do. But if your intent is more to represent a scene or an object or a subject, sometimes keeping that limited palette is a lot more helpful to the viewer, because they can really see then and focus more on the subject. It challenges you too when you're only using a few colors. It challenges you to come up with unique ways of creating the shadows and the highlights within that limited palette. Now I know I mentioned I was using blue as well, and I'm going to introduce that very shortly into the composition. That'll be one of the last additions to it overall. Again, if you prefer a different color palette, if you prefer more blues or purples, then certainly use that today. Experiment. Don't be afraid to try different things. Or even, I mean, you can do one like this, and because you already have the picture, you can print it off again and do another one in another color. It's always a nice idea as well. I've actually done these in different colors myself, depending on what it is I'm looking for that particular day. And I haven't seen anyone put any of their artwork yet onto the Facebook page, but I would definitely love to see that. And don't be shy. Put your work up there. I really want to see what my students are coming up with. I've had a few people email me work, but I don't want to put it up myself because I want to make sure that I have permission to do so. So please go ahead and do that. It really excites me when I see the work that my students have been producing. I think that's amazing. Continuing through with the lighter areas, like I said, I'm going to introduce the blue, but I want to get in all of the highlights from this palette first before I grab my blue. What the blue is going to do is add a contrast in here. This area back here, even though it's inside the tree trunk, it is higher. It's up further than this area here. And so when the light comes across, it's actually going to hit that little bit in the back there. Because we did say that the light was coming from the left side, a little bit on an angle. So I'm going to put some of that brighter colors here, and you'll see once we get into using the blue how that's going to work with everything else. we're just working here in the highlight area and the lighter areas where the sun is hitting. And I don't really have a rhyme or reason how I'm applying the paint right now. I'm just kind of, as things come to my head, I'm just sort of putting it in. And again, if you've never tried oil, I encourage you to give it a try. It's just one of those mediums slowing down a little bit because I'm trying to decide which areas I want to make more in the palette that we're using right now and which areas I want to do the blue. I think I'm going to add a little bit lighter colors up here. I'm using two different yellows. I'm going to use the brighter yellow up top here just to grab some of this. Okay, so now I'm going to switch. I'm going to wipe off. I'm going to use the same brush. I'm just going to wipe off most of the paint. And just grab some blue. I've got a couple different blues. I've got a cobalt blue. I've got a darker lake type blue. I think I'm going to use the darker blues right now. We're going to work over here in the shadows. And we'll just put some of that in. I'm using both blues to sort of mix them together a little bit. I'm just going to put that through just lightly at first. It's easier to go darker, it's harder to go lighter. And I'm going to start adding a little bit of brown into that. I've got my umber here. Which will kind of neutralize the blue a little bit. Pushing that through here. You don't need to put it everywhere, just areas where you feel that the blue would really add to your composition. little bit of brown on this side here. You can pull it right off the page if you want, or you can keep it to the limits of where it's printed onto your canvas paper. Again, that's your choice how you want to do that. Just keep in mind when you go to frame this, the very edge of your painting is going to get covered by the frame anyhow. So the edges tend to not show up when you're displaying it on the wall. Unless, of course, if you mount this, you could also mount it. That's a new thing a lot of people are doing, mounting it onto canvas or onto a piece of wood. Different types of things like that. These days, there's no rules. It's kind of anything goes, and there's various trends out there as well. But again, you don't have to follow the trends. Do what you like to do. Create art that you enjoy, and purchase art that you enjoy. There's lots out there to choose from. So over here, as you can see, we've got more than dark right up against our highlights, so that really adds a little bit of drama. I'm using some of that blue to sort of accentuate that there is the grain of the wood going on. I'm not overdoing it though. I just put a few little indications here and there. It's always that less is more thing going on, so we'll do this and we'll see how it goes. Got that. Okay, so we're continuing with the inside of the tree trunk, and it's going to get progressively darker on this particular area. So you can see what I'm doing. We've got the brighter area up top where the sun is, the darker area down here where I'm working right now. And I'm kind of stretching the dark area into the light area. I've already stretched the light area down into the dark area. And so where the two meet is sort of the blending, and it just happens naturally when you do it this way. And you don't even actually have to do it with your brush. Your eye just blends things naturally as well. And you should try that. You put two colors together on a piece of paper, side by side, and look at them from a distance, and they'll look much different than when they're separate. Because your eye will just naturally blend the colors together. And really, when we're creating artwork like this, when we're painting, we're creating illusions. we're making suggestions to our eye and to our brain that this is a tree trunk, and this is the texture of the tree trunk, and this is the light of the sun over here, and these are the darkness of the shadows over here. So it's all kind of not necessarily tricking our brain, but really creating that illusion. Okay, so I'm going to stop with adding more paint, and I'm going to grab a dry brush, and I'm not sure, I think I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to start doing a little bit. There's a lot of texture, so the eye has a lot to look at. I'm going to start softening some of this. So I think I want this area here to be kind of our focal. So I'm going to kind of soften back here, and all I've done is I've taken a dry brush and I've added a little tiny bit of walnut oil to it, and I'm just going to soften everything. Over here, and as I do that, you can see now that kind of pushes everything more into the background. Things further away have less detail, so that's what I'm doing. I'm softening the detail in the areas that I want to recess in my artwork. And if you're using acrylic, you can do the same thing. You take a brush and you can wet it with a little bit of the water that you've got, some fresh water, and just soften. The same thing if you're doing watercolor. Watercolorists already know how to do this. If you're using pencils right now and you're drawing, you can do the same thing. If you don't have a smudge stick, then you grab a piece of Kleenex or a piece of paper towel, and then you just kind of slowly and softly rub into the crayon or the pencil crayon or the colored pencils that you're using, and just soften the edges together. So as you can see, I'm not losing my colors because I'm doing this very softly. All I'm doing is softening the edges. So rather than having that sharp edge, it's now blurred, and it makes it feel like it's further away when you're looking at it. And some of these white areas I may keep because, as I said, there's little bits of light that comes through in the forest that kind of causes that dappling effect. So some of this I'm going to leave with the little white areas, and some of it I'm going to blend through. And that's artist's choice. As you're going along, you decide what you want to leave, what you want to blend through. I like this process, actually. It's a lot of fun because you can see as you're going through with the blending stage how things are changing in the composition. This area back here I need to push back as well. This is on the far side of our tree trunk. I'm going to let a little bit of this dapple come through. Some of it I'm going to push back. This area here is more forward, so I'm not going to do too much there. Any areas that I feel are more forward, more sticking out, I'm going to leave the detail. And areas that I feel that are pushed back or recessed, I'm going to soften through. And as my brush starts to get saturated, picking up some of the color from the canvas, I'm going to wipe it off. Because I don't want to pull too much of the color through. And then the whole composition will get muddy. So we've gotten quite a ways into our painting. What I'm going to do is instead of proceeding through and doing the background step by step, I'm just going to do a time lapse of that portion. If any of you have any questions or are struggling a lot with the background, you can definitely contact me and I'll help you out. So I hope you enjoyed the free video. My thank you to you for being my faithful followers and registering for the amazing classes that I've been presenting. If you're interested in purchasing this piece, you can contact me directly. I also have many other pieces of artwork available on my website. The link is in the corner right there if you want to check it out. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.